Hi and welcome to Intrepid Wisdom. My name is Deborah J, and on today's episode we have Matt Davies from Mossy Earth. Matt is a co-founder of Mossy Earth, which is a social enterprise that seeks to restore wilderness through its reforestation and rewilding projects. He has a passion for the outdoors and he spends his ever-dwindling free time running ultramarathons, walking his two dogs, both named Luz, and surfing, I believe, as well. So you've two dogs named Luz, Matt.
Yeah, that's right.
How did that happen?
So we've had Luge 1 for 2 years, and we named her Luge. And then more recently, we visited the dog kennels with the idea of perhaps finding a buddy for Luge. And there was this one that sort of took a shine to us. She'd been abandoned, been left on a motorway somewhere. And then when we asked what her name was, they were like, "Oh, she's called Luge." So
oh, no
we were like,
way. You couldn't leave it. Luge 1 and Luge 2. Love it.
Exactly.
So I discovered Mossy Earth a good number of years ago. I had come back from traveling the world. I had been rambling around jungles. And when I came home, I was like, oh, this is amazing. I've now discovered nature in its fullest, and I'm going to go ramble around as many forests as I can in Ireland. And when I came home, I was looking around and I was like, where's all the forest? I just had never, for 30 odd years, had never really noticed that we didn't have very many woods or forests around. So I'd love to have a chat about that today and just about the projects that you have going on. But maybe you could lead us in by just explaining a little bit about you, telling us, your background, and how did you come to starting this project? Because the Mossy Earth project is just such a beautiful project.
Matt Davies from England. I'm a year off 40 in denial, my 39th year. A little bit of background on how I got started in Mossy Earth. I was actually a teacher for a long time. I was teaching abroad for about 10 years and traveling a lot. And I've had a sort of long-standing interest for the environment, for nature, and I wanted to do a bit more. I started, reading about the subject and also seeing firsthand through traveling, sadly, a lot of destruction. I've seen in Sumatra where they're doing, vast clear cuts for palm oil. I've seen these vast clear cuts in Romania for illegal sort of production of furniture and things. The cutting of the trees is the illegal part, but it goes to large furniture organizations. Or here in Portugal, where I live, we've got huge eucalyptus plantations, which are non-native and have problems when there's wildfires, etc. So seeing all this firsthand and reading about the environment, I wanted to get involved, and I started taking some personal steps, changing my diet, reducing how often I fly, signing up to different organizations, signing every petition there was, buying the bamboo toothbrush, you name it. But I just felt it wasn't enough, and this sort of, for me personally, it wasn't enough, and it coincided with, I'd been teaching a long time, and that was sort of drawing to a close, if you like. I'd enjoyed it for a number of years, but wasn't enjoying it as much as I had. And as we discussed briefly the other day, I was doing a course for teaching that was very difficult, much like a master's program, a lot of hours, a lot of energy. I was doing very well at it, but wasn't particularly enjoying it. And I had this sort of moment where I thought, wow, if I could put all this energy and time into something I do like and passionate about, like the environment, maybe something could work. And coincidentally, fellow co-founder Duarte, who I set up Mossy Earth with, he was in a similar sort of pivot in his life. He'd been working for a fast-paced startup in London and New York, sort of pushing a product he perhaps wasn't so keen on. He learned a lot, and he thought, again, if he put all this energy and know-how into a young startup, perhaps something cool could work. We started bouncing some ideas, and one thing led to another, and here we are 3 years later.
And it's a phenomenal project because I know you've been talking about reforesting with natural species as well. And I think a lot of us may not necessarily, we might see nature as a backdrop to a lovely selfie. I'm always saying that. But at the same time, there's actually a lot of very non-native species of trees, especially in Ireland, that are around. And I remember reading that part of this was to do with, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was about reducing the CO2 footprint. So a lot of the governments had to reduce their CO2 footprint to come into guidelines. And to do that, they put in the coniferous trees. But the coniferous trees, if I'm correct as well, they're making the soil too acidic for native trees to be able to grow on the soil and on the land. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, again, I'm not from Ireland, but I know a little bit about it from our projects and from our own research. And so, yeah, Ireland, like many European Northern Hemisphere countries, are under pressure to reduce their carbon emissions. Ireland, much of it from the dairy industry. So there are programs in place to reduce the carbon footprint of the nation. And one way, or the most effective way, is through tree planting. But unfortunately, that can be done one of two ways. And if you're just looking at sequestering the carbon from the atmosphere, you go for a fast-growing tree. Unfortunately, in Ireland, there's a big problem with Sitka spruce. It's these big plantations, which, if you look at it from just taking carbon out of the atmosphere, they're working. You know, you can plant these trees, high densities, they grow quick, so they store the carbon quickly. But they have the other side. You know, there's the other side of the coin is, as you say, they acidify the soils, acidify the rivers. If you've ever been past one or go into them, they quickly become pitch black, which means that they lack any form of biodiversity. They're no use for wildlife. So they're sort of, yeah, they're quite detrimental to the environment and sort of dormant in terms of biodiversity. And as we're learning more, all these problems we're having with the climate is because of this imbalance of nature, this loss of biodiversity. So for carbon offsetting, they're great, but they do have this flip side. So we're focused more on planting native species of forest, and with this wider objective of regaining some of this biodiversity, what some people call rewilding, some people call restoring key ecosystems, or just sort of restoring wilderness. If you walk in a Sitka spruce forest, it's silent and dark. That's not really how a forest should be.
Yeah, there's a kind of an eeriness about it as well. It's not normal. Like if you walk into a normal wooded area or like a jungle or somewhere like that, you've got a lot of like chirping of birds, and you've got a lot of insects, and the terrain is different also. And then you've got different species of fungi, and you've got loads of different kind of brambles and lots of different fruit and berries and whatever for the wildlife that's around. But definitely when you walk into these woods, it's really, really apparent that it's just dead silent, and it's a bit weird, and it's not natural. It doesn't feel natural. So is this something that, do you find in the time that you've been doing this project, have you found that you're able to talk to people and make them more aware about this and get them to kind of see the benefits of maybe reintroducing the native species of trees, which then reintroduces native wildlife, native birds, native animals, and brings the land back to where it is? And it also affects flooding as well, as far as I know, doesn't it?
Yeah,
have you been able to, what's it been like to try and talk people into giving their land back to a more native way?
Yes, I mean, the first point, sort of, you mentioned connecting with people. Unfortunately, there's just a lack of awareness of it, and that's by it's no fault of anyone. You know, we've all got our daily lives, and it's not until you actually consciously scratch under the surface do you realize these things. So a big part is education, and a second part is, I think, particularly large landowners, farmers, they need an incentive. I'm not saying, right, all these non-native species have to be banned, and that there's no future for Sitka spruce plantations. More there needs to be a little bit of a balance. But I also understand from a farmer's point of view, there's not a lot of money in farming anyway. And what is the incentive to protect biodiversity? There's got to, it should, come from top down from the government. They should be rewarded to keep areas that are biodiverse. And what are the reasons for that? Insects, bees, without bees, nothing pollinates. If nothing pollinates, there's no food, and we all go.
Yeah.
So farmers need to be rewarded. They're on really tight margins, and they get a lot of flack as it is, and the last thing they need is a conservation organization beating down on them as well. So it's finding a middle ground. or perhaps finding land that is no longer, it's not suitable for agriculture or not suitable for various types of grants that could be rewilded, reforested. We work down in County Clare with a wonderful organisation that are as passionate as we are about native species, and slowly there's more and more interest, and more and more people are understanding this sort of lack of biodiversity, and particularly lack of wildlife, not just in Ireland but in the British Isles as well. There really is, we look out the window and it all looks very nice, green hills and things, but there really is a lack of wildlife. And since Mossy Earth started 3 years ago, we get more and more interest, emails and calls about people wanting to know more and having a greater understanding of it. So it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and maybe even just regarding the flooding aspect of it, because I think like the climate is changing. I personally, my own belief is this is just a normal natural cycle anyway, however things are being sped up. So I think we need to look at it a little bit more realistically, as opposed to it being like this big, it is a big issue, but we need to stop criminalizing nature for doing what it does anyway. And we just need to be a bit more mindful about the process and how, like, not speeding it up. But in terms of flooding, like, we're getting, our weather is changing, our patterns are changing, our seasons are changing completely, and there is an issue in Ireland, all over the world, with flooding. But a lot of this can actually be helped with the trees as well. Am I correct in saying that? Like,
I mean, going back to the non-native species, sometimes, there's terrible soil erosion. So then when it does rain a lot, the water runs off, it doesn't absorb into the soil, which, is number one. Another point about flooding that I thought about as you were speaking is this reintroduction of the beaver. So there's people are up in arms across England, Scotland about the reintroduction of the beaver. But it's actually had a huge impact. It's what nature does so well. You said don't criminalize nature, and we shouldn't, because nature knows what it's doing. And again, it's finding this balance, because we have to live alongside nature. But, beavers, by their very nature, they create sort of dams up the river, and this slows the movement of water when you have heavy rains. And I know that in some areas of England where the beaver was reintroduced, some of which was illegal, but there's now town councils using the beaver as a flood plan sort of protection method. In 20 years ago, they were spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on building banks and putting this in and that in, and now they realize the beaver can do it much more efficiently. So it's, they're relying now on the beaver, which is great. But yeah, unfortunately, other areas of the country, they're still up in arms and worried about change.
And the thing is, I think, if we leave nature to its own device, it will rebalance itself anyway. It's really the human meddling and where the problems come in, to be honest. I remember reading, is it Peter Wallenben's book, The Secret Life of Trees, which absolutely, I honestly believe that book changed my life. Like, it really did. I was in the Australian outback with an uncle of mine. We were traveling 8,500 kilometers in the outback, and it was just stunning. And I was reading this book, and I remember looking at the trees going by, and I was like, I am never going to look at a tree the same ever again. At the same time, my mum was chopping down a cherry tree at the front of her house and sent me this photograph of all this lumpwood, and I was like, what is this? And she was like, it's the cherry tree from outside. I was like, oh my God, it's like a murder photo. It was terrible. But I remember reading in his book something about, was it in Yellowstone Park or somewhere like that, that they took away some of the old trees, reintroduced some of the native trees, and actually a lot of the old wildlife that had gone missing, I think even wolves had gone missing from the area, had started to come back in, and even some moose as well. I could have this totally wrong, but the information and the moral of it was that when we just allow nature to correct itself, it will correct itself and the biodiversity will come back. So we actually don't really need to do a lot. We just need to stop meddling as much and maybe give it a bit more of a helping hand. But I think the flooding aspect of things is really important, because like in Ireland a couple of years ago, we had a really, really bad storm and loads of people had horrendous problems with their houses. But it's because we need to allow nature to come back into itself, you know.
Yeah, going back to the Yellowstone, you know, that's sort of it's a classic case of rewilding and rewilding gone well. They reintroduced, I believe it was 15 wolves to Yellowstone, and over the course of time, even changed the course of the rivers. So essentially, there had been wolves there. They were wiped out through hunting, various other things. And during that time, the deer populations grew, and in the deer populations, you know, anything that grows, the deer will eat. So any new trees through natural regeneration were being eaten by the deer. As the wolves came in, they kept the population of deer down, which meant trees had a better chance of survival. And then these trees, when you have trees on a water bank, that then changes how the river moves. And then, you know, the wolves were with the deer. The deer's behavioral patterns were changing because they were aware the wolves were around. Other animals could then come back in. And then things like even the more animals were going to the river, you know, bears, etc., taking out salmon, and then when they do their business on the bank, you know, the nutrients are then put back into. So, you know, it's such a complex circle that was just missing this one part, which, you know, in rewilding terms they call a trophic cascade, where someone at the top of the pyramid has an effect on all the other levels. And it sounds so simple, and it is. You know, nature does know what it's doing. But then on the other hand, you know, it's not just about, right, we're going to bring back wolves to Ireland, for example. No, because, you know,
there might be a problem with that. I can't imagine everybody might be up for that, but yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, when you're in places like Yellowstone, or we've got projects in the Southern Carpathians, which is vast wilderness, you can do these wonderful things, bring the bison back, you know, you can encourage wolves and things, but when people have got to live next door to wildlife, it's, for me, Ireland and England and British Isles, very interesting is finding that balance between, because we have to live next to it. You know, the UK is densely populated. We have got some wonderful areas of nature, but, you know, you're never that far from nature. So we've got to live with this wildlife, but there's a lot of wildlife that we could bring back and increase biodiversity that could help, you know, flooding, river acidification, the quality of our soils, etc. Projects that could take carbon out of the atmosphere. So yeah, there is a balance there that we can find.
And how did you go from, I have this great idea, to accumulating land, accumulating all these connections? Obviously, when you're in flow, I always feel if you're in flow with the universe, things they work for you anyway. And like, if you're working with nature wants a hand. So it's probably worked reasonably, you know, sound for you. But how have you been able to go out and say, right, I'm going to do this project here, work with these people and get this land? How does that even start?
Yeah, I mean, right in the beginning, it was as simple as putting one foot in front of the other, and a couple of naive emails here and there, and in-person meetings. But we were very lucky. The project we have down in County Clare, it was through connections from surfing. I used to go to Ireland all the time on surf trips, and it was through some connections there. Our project here in Portugal, both Duarte and I live in Portugal, and I believe it was his uncle works in an area of the government when there's a forest fire, so he had links to forestry. Romania, I think we were invited to a speech about forests or old growth forests, and we made a connection there. So a lot of sort of serendipitous connections, and like you say, yeah, maybe it was nature, you know, it needs a hand, and but one thing has quickly led to another, and yeah, 3 years on, we've now 6 projects, looking for a 7th.
Wow.
Yeah, so
fascinating. I just love it. It's amazing. It really is. And then if people wanted to get involved in terms of because I know you have memberships. I also know that you can go on and buy a tree. I personally have changed from buying people. I used to always love buying cards, and, you know, people want to buy a present for a friend or family to say, oh, I thought about you, and here's your birthday and it's lovely and all the rest of it. But rather than buying something for people to just show them that you thought about their birthday and, you know, here's a lovely gift, and you're giving them something that may be just pointless. how about giving a tree as a gift? Because that's what you're doing. People can actually buy trees. You give them the GPS coordinates. You can see photographs of it being planted and it being done. You know where your money's going to. And I just love the accountability of it. I love the interaction of it. I love the encouragement of people seeing trees as something that they can interact with and actually grow with, because your families can grow with a tree. So can you tell us a little bit more about this project that you have going on as well?
Yeah, so we've got the membership subscription where you pay £10 a month, and each month we plant 4 trees at one of our projects. And every 2 months, a member gets to vote on project decisions. This is where the rewilding part comes in, the really fun part. So each 2 months, we propose a wilding intervention. At the moment, well, this month, we've been working at a project in the north of Portugal to help the coexistence between wolves and farmers in the north of Portugal. There's a small subpopulation of wolves up there in the Douro Valley, and they are penalized by farmers. There's a lot of sheep farming up there, and some of these farmers don't have the money nor resources to protect themselves sufficiently from wolves, so a lot of wolves get illegally killed. So this project is to try and sort of find some middle ground. So we were offering 3 options to our members to choose from, and one was providing guard dogs for the shepherds, and we would buy them the dog, pay for all the veterinary bills and the food for the first 2 years. And these dogs are very good. I mean, they're enormous, these shepherd's dogs. You know, the wolves won't go anywhere near them. The second option was fencing. You know, really simple solutions, but yeah, for some people, they haven't got the resources to invest in it. Fencing, or the third option was camera trapping to know where the wolves are and then to inform the shepherds, this is where the wolves typically are, so, you know, stay away from those areas, sort of thing. And the members voted for the dogs. So each option is a viable option. They voted for the dogs, and so now that's in process at the moment. So yeah, really cool stuff. And I find this interaction between humans and nature the really fascinating part. As I say, it's all well and good going somewhere where nobody lives. It's very easy to do, but when you've got these conflicts and trying to resolve those. So for me, that's a really cool part of the membership. There's also, as you say, the single purchase gift trees. You know, if you just want to give someone a tree, it's a really nice way, and we try to keep everybody informed and up to date about not just the tree, because news on the tree every month would be pretty slow going, but about our projects at large, what we're doing. And then the other thing, how people can get involved. I mean, you can go on the website and there's a whole stack of what we call low impact living guides, and that's people who want to minimize their carbon footprint or their environmental impact. They want to minimize it, and they can read about how they can change their diet, how they can change their energy suppliers, how changes in consumption habits, you know, buying secondhand clothes instead of new clothes, how to become plastic free. Yeah, there's loads in there, and these are sort of to help people minimize their environmental impact, lower their carbon footprint, and they're all practical guides. You know, people can just go in there for free and have a look, because, you know, for us it's you know, before people buying trees for, you know, to offset a flight or something, there's things we can do to minimize our impact. And then there's also a stack of rewilding articles. So if people wanted to get to know more about, you know, what is rewilding, the benefits of rewilding, what's the trophic cascade, projects we're doing about rewilding, they can go in there and learn more about that. So people can get involved like that, buy a tree or sign up to the membership.
Yeah, because there's a lot about rewilding over the last while, I've heard as well. You know, it's one of these buzzwords that comes up. I love the word because it's a real nourishing word for me. But to rewild, like, it's like, what's your definition of rewilding? How do you see rewilding? What is it for you?
Yeah, so it is a buzz term, and a lot of people have different opinions on it. You know, some people are divided: is hardcore rewilders and less hardcore. So essentially, it's letting nature do what it knows best. You know, leaving it to return. However, sometimes we need to put a sort of helping hand. For the Yellowstone one, for example, if you left nature just to its own devices, it would have regenerated, etc. But it just needed that helping hand to put those wolves back there, because those wolves should be there. So rewilding is letting nature do its thing, but giving it a helping hand where necessary. And for me,
And I feel there's a part of rewilding that happens in ourselves as well. And I think that, like, going out into nature, we had Bill O'D, the fungi king of Ireland, on an episode only recently, and we were talking about that as well. Like, and I think it's like nature is so much more than a backdrop, and it's so intelligent and it's so smart, and it's communicating with, you know, it's interacting and it's symbiotic, and we're symbiotic with it. We just don't know to what we're not as conscious of our own symbiosis. And I definitely feel that getting out into nature, walking in nature, even if it's a park, if you only have a park close by, if you don't have a park, buy a plant pot. And just surround yourself. Like, I've loads of plants here, and I think it's just to have nature around you, but it can be so good for your mental health. It can be so good for your soul. Like, it just slows us down. We're living in such a fast-paced world. To just go out and go for a walk for an hour, half an hour, 20 minutes, whatever it is that you can do, and it'll just slow you down. There's actually science that goes with this as well. You've got the art of Shinrinyoko, which is forest bathing, or nature bathing, except sometimes when you say nature bathing, people assume that you're in your birthday suit. You're not. You can be, but you're not generally. But it's actually shown to reduce cortisol levels, to reduce blood pressure, to reduce overall stress, to help you sleep better. It encourages your melatonin. There's so much more going on about getting out into nature than just looking at it, you know, on a screen somewhere.
I believe in Japan, they even prescribe it on, you know, their equivalent of the NHS. You know, if you're having, you know, some problems mentally, they subscribe forest bathing. Incidentally, I was walking just this weekend with a friend in the forest near me, and they said, "Oh, I feel so much better, you know, here in the forest." And I mean, there's a hell of a lot more oxygen in the forest because of all the trees. So, you know, the more oxygen goes to the brain, the happier you feel. It's, you know, really, really simple.
It is very simple, isn't it, in fairness? Yeah. And who do you feel has been your role models as you've been growing up? Who's encouraged you to maybe you haven't had any, maybe you've just gained it yourself, but have you felt there's been any role models who have led you to doing what you're doing today?
I think through the years, I've always had this, I've always been drawn to nature and to be outside, and it's only more recently through Mossy Earth and reflecting a lot, I realized, I just love being in nature. And for a number of years, you know, wherever I was always drawn to it. You know, when I studied at university in Plymouth, I'd be either at the coast surfing, or I'd go up to Dartmoor to go walking or running. So I've always had this draw to it, and I think that comes from my mum. We used to always do long family walks in nature, in the forests, in the South Downs, on the South Downs Way in England, or the New Forest down in the south of England, or on the coast where I grew up. And then my mum, she's always been a keen gardener, and so that's always been around me, whether I was helping, you know, whether I wanted to help or not. So it was a big part of our lives, you know, always watering her vegetables and stuff, and then eating all the vegetables from her garden and things. So yeah, I think it was her influence, that's this sort of love for nature, and she always made us appreciate it. And we were always outdoors. Again, I think it was on the same walk this weekend, I was telling a friend, like, the summer holidays, I kind of vaguely remember my mum sort of locking the house so that we'd stay out, you know, she just didn't want us on computers and things. And we'd be barefoot for the 6 weeks, you know. I loved it, you know. So yeah, early days, my mum and this interest in nature, and then as I've grown up, sort of more inspiration for Mossy Earth was definitely reading things by George Monbiot, the book Feral. It's all about rewilding, and I think that was a highlight for us, and he's sort of a bit of a hero of ours. So more recently that, and the Secret Life of Trees, that was also a big inspiration, that book that you read. Yeah, really, really, I've got a lot of respect for those people.
Yeah, I really do. Anybody who hasn't read that book, you need to read that book. It really, you can never look at a tree or any part of nature the same again without being like, oh God, what have I been doing? I remember being in Scotland. I was on, I did a herbal medicine apprenticeship, And one of my plant studies was hawthorn. And, you know, we had to really, really study the most minutest detail. I really mean this, like down to the most minute detail on the tree. And I remember seeing these tiny little rings, like, you know, there's a branch, you know, a little branch around this size and had tiny little rings on it. And I discovered that was like part of its growth for every year. And yet we just walk around and snap a twig off a tree and walk on. And, you know, now I'm like, oh my God, it took 5 years to grow that tiny little piece, and we just snap it and walk. So my respect for nature is just so completely different to what it was. And because of herbal medicine, I've done a lot of herbal medicine. You know, in Ireland, it's all over the place. I talk Ireland because it's so local for me, but it's so important to have this diversity of nature, because there's a lot of medicine in nature. There's huge amount of medicine in nature, and a lot of food in nature as well, if you want to go foraging, which is another pastime of mine. Have you ever been foraging?
Yeah, I think it's a really wonderful way to motivate yourself to get outside. Funnily enough, today I'm uploading one of these low impact living guides about wild foraging. It's sitting here next to me. So we'll have a guide, you know, about foraging on our website. And then my partner, Joanna, she, like yourself, has studied herbal medicines, and she also studied the hawthorn. We've got a lot of hawthorn here close to the house. And yeah, they even had to sort of give an offering to the tree. I think she poured a glass of wine on the tree before she could take anything. But it's, you know, it's so much fun as well. As she's been doing the course, and I've been sort of peeking in on it and sort of picking up the cool bits, what you can eat, what you can't eat.
It's fascinating. It's just fascinating. Like, really, you're walking around and people see weeds on the ground, and yes, they're weeds, but they're actually medicinal. Like, there's like dandelion. Oh, I could go on for ages. I could get totally lost in the world of herbal medicine because it is fascinating. So in terms of, I like to ask people what your intrepid wisdom is, and is there anything that you would like to impart for, you know, what way would you like to see things going, or the next generations? How would you like them to, what would they like? What would you like to inspire them with?
I'd like them to continue what they're doing. I'm so in awe of the young generation at the moment. What Greta started, and then what so many young people continued. I mean, I was a teacher for 10 years, so I've still got heaps of colleagues in education, and the stories they tell me of what children are doing, and the children are empowering their parents to change. It's coming from the bottom up, and it's just this wave of a new way of thinking. So really, it would, you know, continue what they're doing, you know, believe in what they're doing. Is really amazing, because they'll be the next CEOs of organizations. They'll be the next politicians making decisions, and they've already realized that how we're doing things at the moment isn't working. You know, not to say that there isn't benefits of capitalism, etc., but they realize it's not working. Their futures are in jeopardy, and they want to change. So, I don't think I'll be the one inspiring them. They're doing a good job.
It's true. I've often said it as well, that, yeah, and I've heard it being said, and I know my dad has done projects working with the youth when he was alive as well, and he always said himself that if you want to make change, really you need to work with the kids, because adults are usually pretty well worn in their tracks and hard to sway around. That's not to say that they can't be, but certainly, like, kids are a great way, because kids are the ones who want to go out and they want to go for the walk, and they're full of energy, and they want to, you know, they're the ones who drag the parents out to do the arts and crafts and foraging and all the rest of it. So it is a great way. Do you think that it's something that you could maybe see happening as an education in schools at any stage, as in integrating it and bringing it to schools?
Yeah, again, with an education background, that's been a thought of mine for a long time with Mossy Earth. At this stage, we haven't, I mean, I did some talks in some schools where friends of mine have worked, and we got great feedback, and they were really cool talks, and the kids had amazing questions, you know, really intelligent questions as well. And I don't mean that in a patronizing way to them. It was really fun and really interesting, you know, asking both difficult questions and interesting questions. But we just haven't, probably due to time and manpower, we haven't found a sort of scalable path for that just yet. But it is something that we'd like to incorporate long term. As part of the membership, we're going to do community days, so people can come along to the projects, meet the team, see how things are done, ask questions, get involved, get inspired. So yeah, it is something we're working toward.
So what countries are you in altogether? Can you list them off for people who are listening all around the world? So if they wanted to get involved, maybe you're in a country near them.
Yeah, so we've got 3 projects here in Portugal, one in Ireland, one in Scotland, one in Romania, one in Slovakia. I think that's all. Is that 7 or 8? And then hopefully opening one up in the US. That's been sort of put on hold because of the COVID pandemic. We'd hope for this year, but probably next year.
Fantastic. And so can you give us the best way for people to contact you as well?
So the website's mossy.earth, really simple, mossy.earth, or you could send us an email at team@mossy.earth. Even through the site, you can also book a call with any of the team. We love to chat and meet people. So yeah, we're approachable.
Yeah, and you've got tons of information on the website, and it's very easy to read. It's a nice, relaxing, have a coffee kind of read stuff, which is really cool as well. Okay, so look, it's been absolutely lovely to talk to you because, yeah, as I said, I've been following you guys for a while, and also for presents, I tend to give trees now instead of cards or gifts. Not all the time, to some special people still get nice presents, but the trees are just a fantastic way, and I really do love the fact that people get photographs of the project, what's going on, your GPS coordinates. You can go visit your tree. That's amazing. Like, you know, if you have a christening or a birthday or an anniversary or something, to plant a tree is just an amazing thing to do. So I hope people get involved. So I will stick the links below. So for those of you listening to podcast or video, if you have liked this interview and you'd like to hear more, just hit the link below, comment, like, share. Let us know that you care, and the links for the podcast and the videos and even links for Matt, Mossy Earth and the whole lot will be on intrepidwisdom.com as well. So thank you again for coming on, and yeah, we'll stay in touch and see how things progress for you.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. It was a pleasure.
Take care. Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.